All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of Cognition. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Hutch. I am a innovation principal at Trace3 and the author of the book, The Language of Deception, Weaponizing Next Generation AI.
And I am always, as me, Len No, transhuman technical evangelist for CyberArk, as well as the author of the book Human Hacked. I'm not going to give you the rest of it. Just look it up under Human Hacked.
We do. And really exciting episode today. We have a special guest, Chris Glanden with BarCode. And Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. First off, it's an honor to be able to join you here on the podcast. Again, my name is Chris Glanden. I am the founder and CEO of BarCode Security and also the host of the BarCode podcast.
Yep, and so many more things. Thought leader in the cybersecurity industry, event coordinator,
filmmaker.
I think a mixologist as well. So
yeah.
Going to be exciting conversations.
And one hell of a party host.
Yep,
I try.
Always good times. So routine for today, following our usual pattern, we're going to have some quick conversations about some interesting news stories that we stumbled into. And then from there, we're going to jump into the main segment where we talk about Chris and some of the exciting things that he has going on, from his documentary to his company and some other stuff as well. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our first news story, which is that Xi Jinping and Joe Biden, so China and the United States, have reached an agreement that they will not be using artificial intelligence and integrating it with our nuclear arms weapons systems. So this was fascinating to me, not so much because I have any disagreement with this conclusion. I'm a little bit concerned that this conversation has to be had in the first place. Thoughts, guys?
Well, if I may, Chris, I just got one shot because, I know you and I think a lot alike, so I'm going to let you tee this up. But I'm just going to go being the natural cynic that I am and go, this is China. This is the same country that said, no, we're not going to influence your elections. No, we're not going to try and infiltrate every one of your companies and steal as much data as we can. Trust us. And I'm going to leave it with that.
Yeah, I found this interesting because if true, the typical tech narrative here is that AI safety negotiations are impossible, right? Because China is never going to slow down. But here's an example where you have the US and you have China engaging in common sense negotiations on AI and nuclear weapons. So again, if true, I think it shows that it's possible. And then it also, tells us that we need more of it. It's just insane to me that it's taken this long to get to this point where it's even making a headline like this.
Yeah, where we're at least having some discussions.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. I think that, so nuclear weapons is a whole animal in and of itself, because there's one thing about weaponizing artificial intelligence, which honestly, there is a whole movement against the category of laws, which are lethal autonomous weapon systems. That's anywhere where you take artificial intelligence and you allow it to make the decision of taking a human life. And I think that by doing that, you take away some of the emotional weight that you should bear whenever you do make that decision to take a human life. So I think naturally a lot of people are concerned in general about this category. But nuclear weapons is a whole different animal, because a single misfire or a single failure in that system could result in essentially the annihilation of the entire planet, where we have a back and forth reciprocal exchange of nuclear warheads. And I mean, the literal term that is used in deterrence theory is MAD, or mutually assured destruction. It's this idea that if one party moves, everybody dies. And so while I do agree it's great that we're having conversations, to me, this one should have been a no-brainer. But what I do hope is that this opens up the doorway for having some of those other conversations about the question of whether or not it is ever acceptable to offload the decision of taking human life and taking that away from human beings.
I really... Oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's the bigger conversation to be had, right? I'm fearful of self-driving cars going down a one-way street. This is just an insane concept that you could have AI be the sole point of an execution chain that could put humans down, right? Fully automatic would be, hard stop for me.
My point, I wanted to key in on something that you said, Hutch. As a former soldier, and I got nothing but mad respect for you for it. I think there's just something in terms of the humanity, like you were saying. If you're going to take that life, it should weigh on your conscience. It should be for what I would consider to be a moral reason, or a reason that you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror the next day and say, I did this, but there was a point behind it. Life should never be just another line of code. So I just really thought that was a really great way that you had brought that point up. And I think that's something, unfortunately, when it comes to countries and geopolitics, I think that's a point that's very quickly and easily forgotten.
Yeah. And I think more and more we are seeing movement in this direction. While it might not be nuclear weapons, we are seeing lethal drones that are being deployed that are autonomously killing. That is the Ukrainian-Russian war right now is ground zero for that. We're also seeing Iran come up with a lot of, and we have even defense contractors that are building these same types of systems.
Oh, I was seeing something the other day, and I think it was based in a movie, but at the same time, it made me think, when we think of drones and things, we're thinking of like what you're talking about, the big military style drones. But what about those little quadcopters that are about that big with a swarm of those with like maybe 1 ounce of payload in it? If it ran right into somebody's forehead, and you don't have to take out the whole room, and you can have something very small. And like you said, put about 2,500 of them out there in a swarm. You could strategically just, with the AI, assign it to just go out and wipe out an entire Senate. So, I mean, it's terrifying. And, unfortunately, with geopolitics as they are, I think it's just going to be a race to see who can get it first. I mean, look at what happened not too long ago. And we're not getting into the politics of it, but, it's the first time we've ever seen exploding pagers.
Yeah. Yeah, that was quite the event. Yeah, and I think so. I guess for what it's
that's
worth,
when you say my pager's blowing up. Remember that?
God, that was bad.
Blowing up.
That is bad.
Sorry.
Too soon?
No, it's good. Too soon.
Too soon.
So yeah, I mean, I guess we'll take the good news for what it's worth. I mean, there is at least discussions about AI integration with weapon systems. Hopefully, it trickles down to.
I was going to say, on a closing note to this, I really think that CrowdStrike had something to do with this. That outage, the fact that their AI that was supposed to do the code validation before it released the code, after that outage, everybody just kind of went, you know what? Maybe AI
double thinking the AI integrations and or automations. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I mean, if nothing else,
CrowdStrike just helped make the world a safer place.
It had that, it had that ramification worldwide. So
absolutely, you never know.
Brought to you by CrowdStrike. Not really. All right. So the next one was a study that came out of Oxford University that found that men were more open to robotic elderly care than women are. And for me, when I saw this, my immediate thought was not so much the conclusion that they were drawing attention to, the gender gap between agreement with robotic elderly care, but instead, like, who is having robots care for their elders in the first place?
Yeah.
Thoughts, guys?
I'm going to jump as the resident robot. I get first shot crack at this one. I don't think I would. I want a human, but at the same time, have we looked at the care that elders are given in nursing homes today? I've gone through this quite a few times in the recent past with, my mom and dad and, a lot of my relatives aging up there and being in nursing homes and things. The standard of care out there is not exactly all that good. So, in terms of men over women, I think that's just a matter of preference. But, you say who's having, their elders watched by robots. If we're being honest, most of us are just putting our elders in a nursing home and we don't know who's watching them. And, they're understaffed, undereducated, so in a lot of ways, I think this might be something good. I constantly go back to Isaac Asimov and the fact that his, rules of robotics do not exist. So the whole do no harm thing comes into a little bit of play. But I'd be a little leery of, kind of like most software releases, I'd be a little leery until after they get the first couple of service packs out. But, I think the idea of more autonomized care actually makes sense. And I've even been in contact with some people that are working with a project, I believe it's out in Utah, where they're using completely they're calling them nurse-free beds. So these beds have all of the sensors in it to get all of the vitals. They've got a PICC line in these patients. So from the meds are delivered intravenously. And it's basically essentially a hands-off situation from a medical perspective. The only thing that I think we would have to do is find some way of making up for that lack of humanity that you get with that personal connection to help the patient from an emotional perspective. But I think this has the potential to be, groundbreaking.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think gender aside, that there could be benefits to AI caretakers at any age, 24/7, 365 monitoring, medical alert systems, on demand vital checks. But I mean, according to this specific article, it says old age, right? So that is an important factor, I think, that we need to consider, or that I considered when I looked at this. And their logic could be, for what the stat that they presented, is that because maybe their significant other is old too, and they're not capable of taking care of themselves, or they have trust issues. I think there could be other variables that go into, the decision-making process there. But I'm also not fully convinced that the tech is really primed for that responsibility, or fully primed for that responsibility yet. I think that there's levels to it, for standard care. Yes. Companionship, reminding you need to take your pill. Cool. But an elderly person with dementia that forgets to charge their robot overnight, and now the robot dies before they do, depending on a robot to do other shit that a robot can't do. Those are situations that I think that
I agree. I agree that, for home care, but I think, staffing nursing homes with these types of things, especially when you could potentially get a 1-to-1 patient to robot ratio, I think that would be better than what we're dealing with now.
I think it's that oversight factor too.
Yeah.
That
and
helps.
Keep a human on site just in case. But, I think the way you laid it out was pretty good. What do you think, Hutch?
Yeah, so I think the most amusing part when I read the actual publication from Oxford is it used, and I wrote down this quote just so I could read it. So they listed the key takeaways, and the number one at the top of the list was, overall, people are not very enthusiastic about being cared for by robots. Well, no shit. No, I mean, I completely agree with you guys. I think that there is opportunities to address existing problems that already are there. That it is a non-glamorous job. It is probably very hard to staff those positions, especially at the pay that are made available for them. I think that there are opportunities where robotics could be more suited than others. I think there also may be a shifting sentiment here too, because if we think about it, this is done with the current generation of elderly, and most of our current people that are in elder care right now were not the technology generation. And so this is a very foreign thing
good
to
point.
them. I made a post on social media about this article, and my mom was like, if you ever put me in the control of a robot. But I think it will be interesting to see if this sentiment does shift as it moves more towards our generation moving into elderly care, where we have grown up with this technology all around us instead of a generation.
Here's a question for you, Hutch. your mom said, you know, you're out of the will if you could give me one of these. What would you say, you know, the idea today? Like if I had said, Hutch, if I could get you a robotic through, you know, if I could call up one of my robot friends and say, hey, you know, when my buddy Hutch, you know, reaches that age, would you go take care of him? If I could do that for you right now?
Man, they're going to find me in my old folks' room picking the thing apart to figure out how it works. I'm going to have a blast.
Now, you talking about fully mechanic, or are we talking cyborg situation?
So the article wasn't real clear. I expect that some of this is kind of early stage. So I did a project not too long ago during the COVID pandemic where they were deploying Alexa devices in patient rooms to say, Alexa, tell my nurse this or ask my nurse that. I think it's probably stuff like that, or they have like the Mabu robot, which does exactly like Chris, like you said, reminds you to take your medicine and kind of does that basic companionship stuff. I think that there's a possibility we get to a point where we have full robotic systems that are caring for patients now. Or if you're asking if I would be comfortable with either one, I don't know if I'd be thrilled about it, but I'd make the best of it and have fun playing with the technology. But
I was going to say, let's be honest, all of us are geeks. If we get the access to a robot, we're taking it, whether it's Hutch is going to be over there with a screwdriver in the back of its head, or I'm going, so are we cousins? You know, or Chris will be down there. You know, I want to know how you think.
So what are your thoughts on embedded medical monitoring capabilities that are technical, that may be feeding data to a remote robot?
That's a Lynn question right there.
Well, to be honest, I'm going to tease everybody, and Hutch hasn't even heard about this yet, but I got one of our future guests is actually, and I'm going to drop his company name right now. It's called Cardio, and it's at cardio.io. And this guy is using NASA sonar technology to do hands-free biostats. He can pick up heart rate, blood oxygen, all kinds of things. You know, so in terms of internal biosensors, I'm not a fan. But then again, I'm also, at the end of the day, a staunch privacy advocate. So I don't like the idea of anything that can monitor me that I don't have control of. But I do think that the potential is coming, probably faster. You know, I'm just waiting for some insurance company, kind of like, you remember, I think it was Allstate, where they were like,
you get the discount if you get the implant.
Yep. You know, if you plug this into your car so we can tell if you're an asshole driver, we'll give you a better discount. I'm just waiting.
Man, that's almost certainly going to happen.
You know, and I'm just waiting for somebody like, and we are in no way saying that this is a Blue Cross Blue Shield thing, but that's the insurance company that most people have heard of. You know, they're going to come out and be like, all right, if you get this implant, that'll tell us if you smoke, drink, you know, use drugs, if have precursors for cancer and all this other stuff, so we can determine how not to cover you, we'll give you a discount. I'm just waiting for it to happen.
It's going to happen.
So for all of you out there from the current robot, don't get that implant. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. You know, but in terms of, funny you bring up the bio stuff, Chris, because if you go back to Grindhouse Wetware, that was actually one of the first major implants was the Circadia. The thing was about the size of a deck of cards, and it basically was to just get biostats, just to prove that it could be done. So I just thought it was kind of ironic that you picked that, and that was the first one that was ever made.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the use cases for the robot. And again, I go back to home care because I think, you know, that's where I see this use case happening. So if you have some biotech medical monitoring device,
well, with the smart bed, see, I see a different use case. I kind of agree with Hutch, where I think, you know, the nursing homes are where the major problems are. And, you know, at that point, you can afford to actually get some competent, you know, really skilled people as like your head, you know, your floor nurses. And at that point, they're there to deal with the emergencies. And you just buy these things to handle the day-to-day operations, which actually free up people to handle the actual critical issues.
Yeah.
And there's still humans on site to deal with that need for the split decisions that maybe an AI can't handle yet.
Yeah, and it could be more regulated too.
Yeah, and at that point, like we've talked about on every case so far, there's still that human factor at the end that's making the decision and pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of what AI may or may not be capable of in the future, some interesting news came out from OpenAI, and this was a leak that came out from somebody that supposedly had access to and interacted with their next generation model that's now in training. So essentially the GPT-5.
So, Hutch, now that you've seen this, are you freshening up your resume?
So it will have an interesting impact on the AI workforce. So I mean, so actually, contrary to what a lot of people were expecting, the indication from this leak was that it's only marginally better than GPT-4, while it is significant, it's orders of magnitude bigger in scale in monetary investment. And I think if these leaks are true, I think we're going to see the AI race slow down significantly in terms of the scaling, because if you're going to invest another $100 million, or I mean, we're moving in the direction of billions of dollars, and the return is only marginally better than what you could get for a fraction of the price, investors are going to start pulling their money. Microsoft, Google, they're not going to continue to throw the hundreds of billions of dollars that we were expecting they were going to be throwing at this thing. And so I think if the leaks are true, we probably don't end up with godlike AI like they were predicting within the next few years. I think that it's going to shift the emphasis of innovation away from just throwing more money at it and building bigger and bigger systems, and is really going to force people to adapt and innovate in terms of the way that they architect and create these systems. Now, one other thing that is worth highlighting, though, is that after these reports came out, Sam Altman, who's the CEO OpenAI, did post on Twitter, "There is no wall," indicating that basically what was claimed in those leaks is not true, and that they are going to be able to continue to scale up and has had a couple interviews even since then and claimed that artificial general intelligence at the same level of capability broadly as humans is within a year away. Like, he actually mentioned 2025 as the year. So we are getting conflicting reports. It's always interesting to see the drama coming out of OpenAI, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I was going to say that I think the question is, do we trust leaks from OpenAI? or are these premeditated leaks for whatever reason? I will say that I don't disagree with the fact that a performance wall is evident, and it will be hit at some point. If that's not what's happening now, it's sort of inevitable. We know that the evolution is going to continue. We know that progress will be made, but we can't create resources that don't exist yet. We can't create funds that don't exist yet, especially if you're starting to see investors draw back. So I think there is truth to that. And if that is the case, then, I think it's just a natural evolution of everything else where, you can't run life at warp speed. It's going to hit a wall and it's going to become stagnant at some point.
And I was thinking a little bit for some of the viewers that want something a little bit more basic. Going from nothing to what we consider to be GPTs at this point. Let's compare to NASA. It went from rocket ships to a space shuttle. And the thing that I'm seeing, and the one thing that everybody's really been focusing on, is resources. You can eventually get to the point where you have all of the physical resources that something can ever want, and it's not going. You're going to reach the point of diminishing returns until you change the process of how those resources are utilized. And I think that's kind of where we're at. They've taken the models that we started with, and they've kept advancing off of the same basic start point. Making them bigger, better, more efficient, but that code is only going to go so far. So it's almost like we need to redesign where it needs to go from here, kind of like we did when we went from Windows 3.1.1 to Windows 95. It's going to have to be something completely new. And the other thing that, we were all talking about before we actually started the recording, and I'm just going to throw it out there for these guys because they're the AI experts. We still have the concept of quantum that's, right around the corner. I mean, we just recently hit the new status point of 2000 qubits. and we only need 4,000 to actually start using these things in a normal standard way. So we've got that on the horizon as well. So I think that there's still a ways to go. And do you guys think and I'm throwing this out there just as for my own curiosity, since I've got two of the AI experts sitting here with me, how do you think that a lot of what we're seeing in the current neural networks and AI, can that stuff be ported over directly into or have some type of a transfer capability into the quantum based on your understanding, or are we going to have to start over from scratch there as well?
So I think a little bit of both. I think that there is going to have to be some recoding and refactoring as far as how it's performed, but it essentially is. I mean, the way that we do artificial intelligence is just the composition of billions of floating point operations, just small mathematical operations, which, yes, in theory, we could do with qubit mathematics and with qubit computation. And so I think it's not necessarily just a lift and shift. There is going to be some refactoring, but if quantum takes off to a point where it is usable in the same, I guess, I mean, we've seen some interesting developments that are actually moving it away from kind of the extreme cold temperatures that were required and some other proof of concepts as well. If we get it to a point where it actually is feasible to use by normal organizations and scalable. I think scalable is the real hard part of quantum, is you start these small problems that you have of quantum entanglement and some of the other challenges at scale just become bigger and bigger. And I think that's the biggest obstacle. But in theory, yeah, if we get it to a point where it is usable, it is going to be just as usable for AI as it is for breaking encryption or other kinds of mathematically intensive tasks.
I echo that statement. That's all. I'm going to end it there.
Yeah,
I can't contribute too much to that thought, so I hope you can cut that.
Hutch, well, I mean, I'll even admit, even for me, I mean, quantum's over my head. It's
oh yeah, that's why I said based on what you guys.
That's the physics of the world.
I could not add anything to that statement. So thank you, Hutch. Yeah.
But now it's time to get it.
I guess, okay. Well, I guess taking it back one step, the one thing that I will say on this is that I actually personally hope that this is true for a couple reasons. One, I am very concerned about how society would handle the dramatic and very rapid shift to a world that has artificial general intelligence. So I think possibly this saves us from that. At least makes it a more gradual transition into it instead of one day we have it and the next day we don't, or vice versa. And I think the other thing is that it's exciting because it shifts the emphasis on innovation. And so instead of just the winners are the ones that throw the most money at it, which is what it looked like it was going to be, it really becomes any engineer that's smart enough to come up with the creative way in their garage of how to do this could become the winner, rather than just Google, OpenAI, and Microsoft throwing more and more money at it and saying, hey, we created.
Could some way quantum sort of erase that wall? The wall that that OpenAI is saying that we
potentially
hitting. It's going to be disruptive if it happens. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Like possibly, I would argue even more disruptive than the ChatGPT moment if it really takes off. And I've talked to a few quantum people and I've asked that question: when is the ChatGPT moment for quantum? And there is no consensus. It's all over the board. It's everything from it's going to be just a couple years away all the way up to it's kind of like the same broad spectrum of when is AGI going to happen, all the way up to it's not even going to happen in our lifetime. So, or some people claiming it's not even possible. So I don't know. It's one of those that keep an eye on, but I don't lose any sleep over it until the writing's on the wall.
I want to shout out to Mark Carney and Victoria, who run Quantum Village at DEF CON, good friends of mine.
Yeah.
And you talk to them who are immersed in quantum computing nonstop, and it's interesting to get their take on this as well.
Cool.
All right.
So I think it's time for the main segment.
Let's do it. So I think first of all, Chris, I mean, you're a big player in the cybersecurity industry. You are a thought leader. You're bringing awesome knowledge to the entire community. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and just how you got to where you're at in the industry of founding your own company and kind of all of the different thought leadership that you're putting out?
Definitely, man. Do you want the long version or the redacted version?
The version you want to tell.
Version makes you the most happy. Yep, for sure.
All right, I'll run through it as fast as I can. So born in Wilmington, Delaware. Then when I was really young, moved to South Jersey. My father is a jazz pianist. He used to play in the Atlantic City bars at the time, so we had to really move close to proximity to Atlantic City. Was interesting growing up as a kid. Ultimately moved back to Delaware when I was in high school, and this was 92, 93 era. And so I don't really have your typical hacker journey, but reflecting back, I've always been into technology. I've always loved tech. I was probably hacking shit before I knew what hacking shit was. But I really wanted to be an artist. I think, tracing that back, I really love to draw. I love to draw pictures and unfortunately it's very hard to make a living by drawing.
Extremely.
Especially now, right?
Especially now. Yeah. So it was either, draw for Marvel or become a police sketch artist. Those were like the two avenues that I felt like
we could have met under such different circumstance. he had an egg head and a really long beard.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't take that path. So, but I still continue to do that. As I got older, it's just more of a a side project. But I graduated high school 97. 1 year later, I found out I was having my first kid. So at the time, I was just trying to make ends meet, and I was like, I really need to provide now. And I got an opportunity for working at Comcast. It wasn't Comcast at the time; it was a local cable provider. But I didn't go to college after high school, and I really was focused on just providing at that point. And I think getting into that position because I needed the money. It was an IT support position, but that was the driver. That was the driver for me to get in. And again, tracing back, I always loved technology. So this was like, okay, cool. It pays good. It pays $11.52 an hour. I'm set. And at that time that was good money for me. So I think that was the portal that I entered and I never returned from. That point in time, late 90s, early 2000s. And I remember when HDTV launched, it was like 3 channels and we were all in like this back corner room, like, whoa, this is amazing. So
I remember the first time I saw HD, it was like you were saying, it was really early, and you could see the makeup lines on the newscasters at night. I remember that shit.
Yeah, it was like, this is incredible. And so I got to see that. I was one of the first to see that because I was on the technical side of the fence there.
Cool, man.
But during the same, 4 or 5 year span, I got to see the birth of video on demand. I got to see the birth of DVR. And then I got to see the birth of the ever changing high speed internet get rolled out on a residential deployment mass scale. And I was one of the first people because I think with Comcast, if you worked there, they would give you a computer. I think you got, high speed for free. You were part of the beta team. So like I got to download songs on Napster that took 45 seconds, not overnight.
Ooh.
And I was like, this shit is great, man. And then so there again, man, it was just like I was hooked at that point, and I really wanted to get into IT because although I was working on the cable support side, I worked, right next to the high-speed internet support guys, and I got to really just, feed off of their knowledge and become really truly interested in what they were doing. So then from there, I just I got into IT. I think my first role was an IT help desk. So actually IT help desk at Chase which was like getting thrown to the fire, but I'm glad I did
Mm-hmm.
it that way. Then I got into software support, and then finally got into security in 2012. I worked with a guy in IT that was into security, and he went to leave and work for a small bank, and he was like, he knew I was interested in security, and so he brought me in as just a level 1 analyst, just you know, to look at tickets, right? And so and I think like day one in security, I realized that it was no longer a job. It was no longer a 9 to 5. This is what I really like doing. I wouldn't mind going home and like learning shit on off hours, which I never really did before that.
Yep.
To the
You
degree of interest, right?
You got bit.
I got bit. And so from there, man, I just I took like my CEH a month after being at that company. I didn't know shit about security, failed my CEH version 8, I think it was. But then that was just more fuel for me to go back and get it like 2 months later. So
Right on.
got it. And so, yeah, man, just fast track from a level 1 security analyst up to where I'm at now, running my own security consulting firm focused on helping small to medium-sized enterprises.
That's awesome, man. And you have such a presence when you're out there, dude. You know, the security scene is huge, you know, and you know, the idea that you are such a unique character, you know, there, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but you know, there's thousands of us out there, and you're like one of those people that you can walk into a room and everybody knows you're there, man. And it's really cool because you bring a lot of knowledge and experience to the table.
I appreciate it, man. I really do. And I think like my artistic background, I think comes through with that. And then also the fact that I would not advise anybody to not get the education if that's made available to them. But also for the fact that I do want to point out that especially today, that you don't necessarily need that to become successful. For me personally, I think that became more of a driver to become successful and become in the business of proving people wrong, because I was always told that I couldn't do it because I never went to school, because whatever the reason was, it was really hard
Dude,
for
spite is the greatest motivator in the world as long as you don't let it corrupt you.
Yeah, and it still drives me to this day.
Me too.
Because I tell myself I can't do something if nobody else is telling me that, and which just pushes me to that next level. So I still use that. I mean, I don't think that fire ever goes away.
Only if you let it.
Only if you let it. You're right. But never become content either. That's the other thing is becoming, you know, that character, like being able to do security and then doing consulting and then doing podcasting and now doing film. It's like you never reach the finish line. So for me, it's like, all right, I got to this level. There's something else that I need to do to continue on.
Yeah. And I do agree, as a hiring manager in technology, the first thing that I look for, it's not a 4-year degree. It's not certifications. It is, do you have passion? And if you're out there creating a GitHub repo or doing a blog or publishing your own thoughts, that to me carries way more weight. So,
yeah,
good
it's
stuff.
passion, man. It's yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just curious. Can you tell us a little bit about the BarCode branding? I mean, it's the name of your podcast. It's the name of your company. Where does that come from? What was the inspiration and origin behind that?
Yeah, man, that's a crazy story. Because I was working at another VAR at the time that you and I both know, and I wanted to just do a podcast, man. Like I never really felt like I always just felt like a podcast would be a way at the time, and this was 2019, 2018, that it was just a way to learn. Like I think podcasts were really big at the time. It was like, you know, it was just the new era of learning, and I just wanted to be able to not only spread knowledge but also to talk to others and get knowledge back. So I remember going to the firm that I worked with at the time, and they shot it down. They shot down the idea. which is probably the best thing that happened to me. Because then I think the next day I spun it up on my own. And if I didn't do that, my firm wouldn't exist today. My firm, it was spawned out of that podcast that I started at the height of the pandemic, because networking opportunities and camaraderie and a lot of things were really just absent at a time when we needed it. And I really wanted to virtualize that. And so by them not taking that on, it allowed me to the freedom to be able to create that vision, create it the way I wanted to without any guardrails. And I just enjoyed it. I just enjoyed it as I continue to do consulting for a firm, just be able to run that on the side. And then again, I got hooked. Like it was great, man. Like I just got to meet so many great people at a time where people couldn't travel. So I was getting, talks with Bruce Schneier, with Ron Gould, with all of these big names that I probably wouldn't get, or I think I wouldn't get unless, of the timing, which is very unfortunate timing. But I also had that accessibility to folks that I wanted to have on and talk to. And so, the BarCode podcast ran for 3 years, just being, a labor of love and just a passion project, talking about what I wanted to talk about. It ranged from cloud security to talking to ex-black hats to talking to, CISOs to like, there was never, I took a page out of Joe Rogan's book when he said,
I was going to say your podcast and the guests that you've had and the topics that you've covered, you can't put your podcast into any one category. And I think that's one of the coolest things about it is if it's something that you find interesting, you're like one of the few podcasters that I've ever found that I think has never kind of lost their vision for what they wanted to do. It's what you think is cool.
Yeah, it's exactly what I think is cool and what I would listen to. And that's how I base who I'm going to talk to. And this industry is awesome, man. Like 99% of the people I've reached out to, I don't know them from shit. And they're like, yeah, man, I'll come on and talk to you. I mean, the industry by itself is just so willing to help someone else out and, spread knowledge.
We have a great community.
Great community, 100%. So continued the podcast. And then, through in parallel to my consulting. And at one point I said, you know what? There's been many ideas that I've wanted to run with on my own in terms of consulting. I understand the business now. And then on the side, I've built a network that knows me, that trusts me. And I think in this business, trust is everything. Yeah. And so at one point I said, you know what, I want to start my own firm. I'm going to take a leap of faith. And that was it, man. I started BarCode, the firm, which consists of the podcast. It consists of strategic advisory services, VCSOs, pen testing, training services. But I focus on the small to mid-size enterprises, 50 to 500 people, right? So,
and if people wanted to check out your website,
yeah, barcodesecurity.com. I mean, everything is there. It's the services, it's the podcast, and then over the past year, I've been getting into film, which is kind of an expansion of podcasting where you're still storytelling. But I've always been fascinated with film. So I wanted to go down that route and start visually presenting storylines to a mass audience. That's, stories that are bred out of the cybersecurity world.
For those of you that may or may not have been there, if you weren't, you missed an amazing party, keeping it in true Chris Granlund style. Back at DEF CON, he rented out the BarCode Lounge and debuted his first film. First
film, Inhuman, which is all about the weaponization of AI, and was honored to have Hutch there as the foremost expert on AI weaponization. But yeah, it was their second year in a row doing a live podcast at a bar in Vegas called BarCode. And super cool people, man. And yeah, I'm looking to continue that.
Order a bottle cap if you go there.
That was good. That was, yeah.
Yeah. For anybody that knows me, one of my favorite tricks to do is I'll pull a beer bottle cap to show off the magnet in my pinky. So I walk up to the bar at Chris's event and I'm like, yeah, can I get a bottle cap, please? And she's like, okay. And comes back like 10 minutes later with this drink and hands it to me. I'm like, what the hell is this? And she goes, you asked for a bottle cap. And if for those of us that are old enough to remember, there were these little candies that we had when we were kids called bottle caps. And they were kind of like a sweet tart kind of a candy.
Yeah. Yep.
And this drink tasted just like it. And it was absolutely delicious.
It was
good. But that was also adhered to your hand too.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I saw that.
So yeah, I mean, let me echo here what Lynn's saying. I mean, yeah, I got the privilege of being at the premiere. It was amazing, extremely well done as far as the effects and the quality of production all around. Mm-hmm. And so I'd just be fascinated to hear, like, I know a lot of people in cybersecurity. I know a lot of people in hacking. I don't know a lot of filmmakers. Yeah. And those that I do know are probably amateur at best. So like seeing something at such a level of quality, especially for your first one, I'd love to know how you got into it and kind of
how did this come together?
Yeah, thanks, Hutch. Well, what's crazy is that there were only two people outside of the talent that we had in the film that produced this. It was myself and another gentleman, Matt Barnett, who is also in security. So he's not a filmmaker either, but he does filmmaking on the side. So I said, look, man, you know my vision, you know how we want to portray this. Being in security and being a filmmaker, it was just the perfect synergy to put this together. The original concept for Inhuman, I'll have to go back and trace the episode number, but I actually spoke about this on a podcast, and the idea was sort of formulated during that conversation. And then I just took it to the next level. I think the next day I said, look, man, I got to put together a film on this, a documentary on this. But my goal was to educate a mass audience. So not just people in security who understand the risks of AI weaponization, but, you know, to show this to my neighbor who works at a refinery,
that was one of the points that I was going to make, Chris, is you did not make, this is something that anybody could watch and take something away from somebody who's, as advanced in AI as Hutch, somebody mid-level like myself to, like you said, somebody that has nothing to do with tech at all, that just hears about all the fantasies and, what could be's. And this is a great way to level set across the board. And I think, that is a very, very difficult thing to do when it comes to, topics like this, is being able to disseminate it in such a way that it can be digested by the masses. And I think you've done an amazing job. Well,
thank you, man. And the way that I did that was try to relate it to what everybody else sees, your self-driving cars, your deep fakes attacks now that are going mainstream that everybody knows. So it's like, but people are like, well, how does that affect me? That doesn't affect me. Okay, it does affect you, and this is how it affects you. But yes, I was fortunate enough to interview, very elite experts in AI, from security to developers to historians, and I was very lucky to get people that understood the message and not to be overly technical, to be able to explain it in ways that would resonate with anyone that watches it. So I owe a lot of that to just the people that I interviewed.
Awesome. Well, what else can you tell us about other projects that are currently in the works? And
before we get into the future projects, I know that we're talking about this amazing documentary, and I know people are going to want to watch it. I know that you're working on distribution channels. So before we get into the future projects, is there any way that somebody can get a hold of this? What are you hoping to get? Where do you want to take it next? Is there, if somebody wants to try and do a showing of this, can they reach out to you?
Yeah, definitely. If you want to do a private showing right now, reach out to me, Chris at BarCodeSecurity.com. We did premiere it in Vegas as our West Coast premiere. We just premiered it in Philly at an AI conference. I'm going to premiere it here in my hometown of Wilmington, Delaware pretty soon. Right now, because we are working and talking to distributors, we're also talking to Netflix and Paramount Plus as well. I can't release it publicly But contact me and I'll get a way, or I'll figure out a way to get that to you so you can screen it. But yeah, that's the plan right now. And again, these are things that, because I'm still learning, these are things that I'm still learning. Distributors, film festivals, all of these things. And it's just going to help me with, the next film that we'll be producing.
Yeah, we didn't want to just throw it out there and tell you guys how great it was and then go, too bad you can't see it. So
you will see it.
You will see it.
On that. Yep.
You will see it. And the challenge is, we all know how fast-paced AI is. And so we also need to be cognizant of releasing this when it's outdated. I mean, there are aspects that are already outdated. I mean, it could be outdated tomorrow.
But even if the technology moves past it, it's still well worth it. There's still going to be a lot of relevance just in terms of, how he's laid out the history, and it's a great foundation. So regardless, you're going to want to watch this one.
Yeah. I'm surprised how well it's aged for being a year and a half after filming. So it means I did something right in terms of just, laying out the risks and the risks that are still evident today. So
yeah, you did a really good job of being a little bit of a prophet in there too.
What do you mean?
If you compare
by being able to like predict what happens.
Yeah, some of this, if you filmed this over a year ago and we see where we are today, you were a little bit prophetic in there as well.
Yeah, and I stunned myself with that. Like, I just went and watched it again last night just to review it, and I'm just like, again, man, a lot of the credit goes to the experts that I've interviewed. I just laid the storyline.
So what's coming up next? You got events. You've got. Well, I know for a fact that you're going to be giving your first presentation. So that's going to be exciting.
My first conference presentation is going to be at B-Sides Philly in December 6th, and the presentation will be on algorithmic fate. So this is the first time that I'm doing this presentation. A lot of research has been included with this, but it's all around how AI and ML, if it could determine the fate of humanity in some instances. And again, this is not my personal beliefs. This is not personal views, but it's laying out research that has been done, legitimate research that has been done. We always think about AI. Okay, cool, man. We can go on ChatGPT, ask a question. We can go on Midjourney, create a picture. But you have to think about the existential implications of AI and not discredit that.
And Chris was really cool and gave me a little bit of a preview of some of his deck earlier this morning. So I kind of seen a little bit of a preview of this, and I will tell you right now, I'll be sitting in the front row.
Thanks, man. I need the support, man.
Yeah,
I do want to say one thing real quick, and what really helped motivate me to write this particular presentation was Hutch, your talk at I believe it was HUSECCon, where I think you started out the talk by saying, never discredit
about this.
Nobody wants to talk about this, but also don't discredit science fiction. What you believe is science fiction may not be science fiction in the future. We're living in 1980s science fiction right now.
Amen.
And so for me, it was like, all right, everybody looks at this as, yeah, you can't predict what's going to happen to me later. And there's going to be a lot of pushback on that. But at the same time, shit that we were talking about 20, 30 years ago was just insane. And we're seeing it happen now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So thank you for the motivation to even go down that rabbit hole.
I mean, have you guys ever seen those? I don't know. I think there's a website, but it's like all of the things in Star Trek that came true.
Yeah.
Oh, they just have a running tally of checking them off.
Oh yeah, because I mean, if you remember the tablets, we got tablets now. You had the little beep beep beep. Oh, we got cell phones. You've got Fitbits. So you can basically just go, oh yep, now I've got all of his vitals. It's like all the shit from Star Trek that used to be science fiction, and we go, wow, that's really cool, and it's like fucking hey, we got it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So
I mean, so I actually talked about this in my book a little bit too, how I feel like science fiction historically was a way for futurists to put their ideas out there in a way that wasn't as quickly dismissed. Because
I
if you do
agree.
it in a scientific way, sometimes people are pretty quick to dismiss that. Whereas I feel like people have used science fiction as a way to kind of follow the trend line and predict what is coming. And it has, in many cases, tended to be really reliable. So
Well,
uh,
here's more of a philosophical question. Had it not been for those 80s science fiction things, would we have those things today?
yeah, I mean, it's a great
Yeah.
question. Yeah, whether we're forming reality based on our perception of what was supposed to be the future, or whether that was always going to be and
Yeah.
somebody had good
I
foresight.
mean,
It's a hard question to answer.
it's definitely one that we should take offline at a bar somewhere.
Yep.
I mean, it also goes back to, strive to prove people wrong. And I say that in a motivating
Mhm.
factor, right?
Yeah.
This will
Yep.
never happen. Okay, I'm gonna prove to you that it can happen.
Mhm.
And that doesn't happen in every case, but the closer that you can get to that, it not only it just continues the conversation, and it makes people think outside of the box.
And it forces people to come up with new things, like you said. That's in my opinion, that is the essence of what being a hacker is just refusing to accept what is told.
Exactly.
Any other events coming up?
Well, you mentioned bar, so I think we're all three of us are going to meet up in the DFW
Oh yeah.
region soon, December 12th. So about a week after B-Sides Philly, we will be in Grapevine, Texas, with the Cyber Circus Network for our Lone Star Cyber Circus version 2. We ran this last year. We had a lot of fun. Cyber Circus Network is myself, Philip Wiley, Kevin Pentecost, and Jason Papillon. And yeah, man, we just get together and we have a really good time and doing a live podcast. So hoping to see you both there. And
I've already
that'll
got
be a
my
good time.
ticket, and I have a suggestion for the Cyber Circus.
Okay.
Your followers, we need to be called the clowns or the jokers.
Clowns. It's like the Juggalos for the insane clown
No,
costume.
no juggalos, man. I'm from Detroit.
Okay.
No juggalos.
Okay. The
No
clowns.
juggalos.
All right. The clowns. We have a really cool walkout song that Philip suggested. It's from Kiss. It's called The Psycho Circus.
I thought I have that in my playlist. Oh my God.
Dude, he played that. I was like, that's it, man. That's our walkout song.
Actually, I have two walkout songs that when I get to do them. The first is Ladies and Gentlemen by Saliva, if you've ever heard that one.
Yes.
And the second one is called Replica by Fear Factory.
Okay.
And if you've never heard of Fear Factory, they're kind of this old school metal band, but they do chanting, and their whole shtick is the machines taking over. So it's kind of like my people and my theme songs.
Nice.
That's cool.
They've got one track. It's called Adapt or Die. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm trying to convince Hutch here in this moment while we're actually recording this to let us use that as our, opening, music until we get yelled at for copyrights.
You'll get a warning letter first, so you're okay.
Cease and desists are there for a reason. That means get away with it until you get caught.
Hey, I'm all on board. You got to talk to the ITSP magazine guest.
Well, last I want to tell you, man, the day after B-Sides Philly, filming starts on my new documentary. I can't tell you too much, but I will say stay tuned.
Awesome.
Oh, don't you hate it when he does stuff like that? Because after you guys see Inhuman, you'll realize whatever's coming next, this guy knows what he's doing. And, he's very unique in the fact that, people like me and Hutch, that you can pick a podcast, throw a dart and hit, some cybersecurity podcast. Chris here is the first person that I've ever seen, like you said, take it to that next level. And I hope that whatever your next podcast is, and honestly, I hope whatever you continue to do these, because I think you're able to reach a much larger audience. And, at the end of the day, I think we're all about trying to educate the masses and the next generation. And these are things that are going to last on in perpetuity. So, hats off to you, man.
Well, thank you, man. I want to thank you both for being, differentiators in the industry and continuing to push the boundary lines. And that's why I love you guys. I love this podcast. I'll continue to push that. So you both, are inspirations to me, especially in the realm of AI. I learned a lot from you both. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. This was an awesome conversation. Fantastic time. So we'll definitely have to do it again sometime.
Definitely, man. I'll see you in about 2.5 weeks.
Any closing words? Anything you'd like to tell anybody on the way out, Chris?
No, I mean, barcodesecurity.com. That's where you can find me, Chris at barcodesecurity.com. I'd love to continue the conversation. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So absolutely. If you like our stuff and you haven't heard Chris's podcast, go check it out. His look through his archives, man. He is like, oh God, who is the old dude? I'm having a moment. The old dude with the suspenders that like interviewed everybody. King. Larry King.
Larry King.
Chris is like the Larry King of cyber. It doesn't matter who they are. Next time I see you, Chris, you need to change yourself to some really thin frame glasses, put on a dress shirt with some suspenders, and just sit there and just lose all sense of tone, and just maybe for Halloween next year, you should go out as Larry King.
Or King. Is that my new hacker handle? Because I'm still waiting on you to
I know it's coming,
my hacker handle, man.
It's coming. It's coming.
And I've had both of you on the show as well. Do you happen to know the numbers?
Not off the top of my head.
All right. If not, go to BarCode and listen to both of their episodes, man. It's phenomenal.
So I got nothing else. Thanks, Chris, for coming on. Always a pleasure, man. Look forward to seeing you here in a couple of weeks in Philly. So Hutch, take us out.
Yep. Cyber Cognition over and out.
Peace.